First we recite the 18 mantras, and then we will have the class. Om Purnam Ada Purnam Idam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnam Eva Vasishyate Ishavaishyam Idam Sarvam Jatkinja Jagatyam Jagat Dinatak Dena Punjitaha Magridaha Kashasviddanam Kurvan Evaha Karmani Jajiva Chekchatam Samaha Evam Tvayi Nanyate Tustina Karma Lipyate Nare Asurya Namate Loka Andena Tamasavritaha Tamste Pritya Bigachanti Yeke Chatma Hano Janaha Anajadika Manaso Javiyo Nena Devam Apavam Purvam Asat Da Davato Jnana Teti Sista Tasmin Apumata Viswadadati Ta Dejati Ta Nejati Ta Dure Ta Advantike Ta Dantarasya Sarvasya Ta Dusarvasya Syabayataha Yastu Sarvani Bhutani Atmani Vanupasyati Sarvabhute Suchatmanam Tatona Vijigupsate Yasmin Sarvani Bhutani Atmeva Budvijanataha Tatrako Mahakaha Soka Ekatmam Anupasyataha Sa Prayagachchukamakaya Mavrinam Asnaviram Mudam Asnaviram Chukram Asnaviram Sudam Apapavidam Kavir Manisi Paribu Swayambu Yatatat Yaturutan Vyadadas Chasvatipyaha Samabhyaha Antan Tamaha Pravisanti Yevidyam Upasyate Tato Bhuyayvate Tamo Yayuvidyayam Rataha Anyad Evahur Vidyaya Anyad Ahuras Vidyaya Iti Susruma Dhiranam Yenastad Vichakside Vidyam Chavidyam Chayas Yastad Velobayam Saha Vidyaya Miritum Tirtva Vidyayam Ritamasnute Andham Tamaha Pravisanti Ye Sambhutim Upasyate Tato Bhuyayvate Tamo Yayusambhutam Rataha Anyad Evahur Sambhavat Anyad Ahur Sambhavat Iti Susruma Dhiranam Yenastad Vichakside Sambhutim Cha Vinasam Cha Yastad Velobayam Saha Vinasena Miritum Tirtva Sambhutam Ritamasnute Hiranmayana Patrena Satyasya Bhitam Mukam Tattvam Pusam Apavrinu Satyadharmaya Dristaye Pusan Ekasya Masurya Prajapatya Vyuha Rasmin Samaha Tejo Yate Rupam Kayanatamam Tate Pasyami Yo Savaso Purushaha Sahamasmi Vayuranilam Amritam Atedam Basmantam Sariram Om Krato Smara Kritam Smara Krato Smara Kritam Smara Om Agnenaya Supatare Esman Vishwani Deva Vayunani Vidvan Yodajmaj Juhuranamino Bhuyastam Tenama Utim Vidama Om Tat Sat Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Ishapanishad Ki Jai. So today we're going to review Mantra 1. We've already done the introductory mantra, and now we're going to do Mantra 1 and a review. And it says, everything animate or inanimate that is within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself, which are set aside as his quota, and one should not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. So, in this first purport, there are, in this purport to the first mantra, there are 33 very significant points. So you can understand how compact and intense Prabhupada's purports are. So the first point is, Prabhupada says, Vedic knowledge is infallible because it comes down through the perfect disciplic succession of spiritual masters, beginning with Lord Krishna himself. Since he spoke the first word of Vedic knowledge, the source of this knowledge is transcendental. The words spoken by the Lord are called Apurusheya, which indicates that they are not delivered by any mundane person. A living being who lives... Okay, so that's point number one, that the Vedas are perfect and infallible. They come down through the disciplic succession, beginning from Krishna to Brahma, to Narada, to Vyasa, to Sukadeva Goswami, to Sutta Goswami, and so forth, to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and then the six Goswamis, and then fast forward also to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and then you have Jagannath Babaji, and you have Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and so forth, right to Srila Prabhupada and to us. So, that's point one. Point two, a living being who lives in the mundane world has four defects. 1, he is certain to commit mistakes. 2, he is subject to illusion. 3, he has a propensity to cheat others. And 4, his senses are imperfect. No one with these four imperfections can deliver perfect knowledge. The Vedas are not produced by such an imperfect creature. So that's point number 2. Point number 3. Vedic knowledge was originally imparted by the Lord unto the heart of Brahma, the first created living being, and Brahma in his turn disseminated this knowledge to his sons and disciples, who have handed it down through history. So that's number 3. Since the Lord is Purnam, all perfect, there is no possibility of his being subjected to the laws of material nature, which he controls. So that's point number 4. However, both the living entities and inanimate objects are controlled by the laws of nature and ultimately by the Lord's potency. This Ishapanishad, okay, so that's number 5. And then number 6, the Ishapanishad is part of the Yajur Veda, and consequently it contains information concerning the proprietorship of all things existing within the universe. So that's number 6. Number 7, the Lord's proprietorship over everything within the universe is confirmed in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita, 7th chapter, verses 4 and 5, where para and apara prakriti are discussed. The elements of nature, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego, all belong to the Lord's inferior material energy called apara prakriti. Prakriti means energy. So you have inferior spiritual energy, apara prakriti, and superior spiritual energy, para prakriti. Both of these prakritis or energies are emanations from the Lord, and ultimately he is the controller of everything that exists. There is nothing... Okay, so that is point number 7. Point number 8. There is nothing in the universe that does not belong either to the para or apara prakriti. Therefore, everything is the property of the Supreme Being. So this is actually the unified field theory that Einstein was looking for. But of course, since he was basically an atheist, he dabbled a little bit in talking about God, but his odd God was the impersonal God of Spinoza, who was a philosopher that Einstein had a lot of respect for. So he didn't really believe in God, but he dabbled with the idea throughout his life. But this is the unified field theory. That everything in the material universe is either para or apara prakriti. So Einstein, being a mundane scientist, he rejected the existence of the spiritual world. So therefore, how can he figure out the unified field theory? It's not possible. He's only concerned with the material nature, and even that he did not have a clear understanding of it. He had some understandings, but not a complete understanding. So now, number 9, because the Supreme Being, the Absolute Personality of Godhead, is the complete person, he has complete and perfect intelligence to adjust everything by means of his different potencies. Now, this is a very important point because Krishna has unlimited powers. Therefore, there's no such thing as sinful activity when it comes to Krishna. Whether he does something that seems to be right or something that seems to be wrong, they are both right. Because he can adjust all situations by his inconceivable, unlimited powers. Human beings cannot do that. And Krishna, of course, is not influenced by the modes of material nature, nor is he influenced by time, nor is he influenced by birth, death, old age, and disease. He's completely transcendental. His body is completely transcendental, and therefore no one is comparable to him. No one can be equal to him. No one can be greater than him. And he has what's called mutually contradictory properties or qualities. He is very far away, but yet he is very near. He does not have legs and arms like us, made with flesh, blood, bones, ligaments, and so forth. But yet he has legs and arms. But his body is made of Satchitananda Vigraha, meaning his form is made of eternity, bliss, and knowledge. So there's no difference between Krishna's soul and his body, whereas for us, there's a difference between our soul and our body. Therefore, it's very difficult for us to understand Krishna because we're living in duality, and Krishna is not subject to that duality. And it's hard to imagine that there's someone like him who has unlimited powers, who's not under the influence of time, not under the influence of the modes of material nature. He does not have a material body, but yet he has a body. It's a spiritual body. So this is incomprehensible for materialistic people, like Einstein and other scientists and philosophers and so forth. So this was point 10, that because the Supreme Being, the Absolute Personality of Godhead, is the complete person, he has complete and perfect intelligence to adjust everything by means of his different potencies. Now there's an example to understand this point. And Prabhupada writes, the Supreme Being is often compared to a fire, and everything organic and inorganic is compared to the heat and light of that fire. Just as fire distributes energy in the form of heat and light, the Lord displays his energy in different ways. He thus remains the ultimate controller, sustainer, and dictator of everything. So now we're coming into point 10, but he gave the example of fire. So you cannot say that fire is light or that fire is heat. But you can say that heat and light are qualities manifest by the fire. So, in the same way, Krishna has different potencies. The two main potencies are apara prakriti and para prakriti. Apara prakriti means the inferior spiritual energy, and the para prakriti is the superior spiritual energy. What's the difference between the two? Because they're both spiritual energy, meaning they're both eternal. But the material energy will at times be unmanifest, whereas the spiritual energy is always manifest. So, therefore, number 10, he thus remains the ultimate controller, sustainer, and dictator of everything. He is the possessor of all potencies, the knower of everything, and a benefactor of everyone. He is full of inconceivable opulence, power, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. So this is the way to differentiate Krishna from all other living entities, including Brahma and Shiva. He possesses in full 6 opulences: beauty, fame, knowledge, power, and riches, and renunciation. So he has now, normal living entities. They have 1, 2, 3, or 4 of these opulences, but not in complete, not completely. They have a little bit of wealth, beauty, fame, etc. Krishna has these in full. In other words, no one can be equal to him or greater than him, and he possesses these 6 opulences completely. Okay, so then, because he's the possessor of all potencies, and a knower of everything, and a benefactor of everyone, he is full of inconceivable opulence, power, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. This is a definition of Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's number 10. Now, number 11. One should therefore be intelligent enough to know that except for the Lord, for Lord Krishna, no one is a proprietor of anything. Okay, now that's a big point. When people understand this point, they are ready to become a devotee. The false ego of the majority of people in the material world makes them believe that they are the proprietor and they are the doer and they are independent. And that is not true at all. We're all controlled by the laws of nature, and the laws of nature are the laws of God. And therefore, there's birth, death, old age, and disease. Those are laws of nature. You cannot change that. You cannot find a solution to these things. They just keep going on and on and on. And then you also have many other laws of nature that control people. Like, for example, everyone is controlled by the 3 modes of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And everyone is forced to work to maintain themselves. And also, everyone has or experiences 3 types of miseries. Miseries caused by this body, miseries caused by other bodies, that's including insects and snakes and all those other living entities, and miseries caused by cataclysmic events, hurricanes, tsunamis, earthquakes, etc. So, and then we're always controlled by the time factor. So we have 4 major things that control us. And there are more. There are more things that indicates that we are always subordinate, and we are not the controller. So, therefore, but people, due to their false ego, they pretend that they are a controller, that they're independent, and that they can even emulate God through science and reason and logic. So these are all false concepts. But the main concept that civilizes a person is when they realize that God or Krishna is the proprietor of everything, including this body, including this intelligence, including this mind, including these, including everything. That he's the proprietor of everything. And therefore, if you accept that, then you realize that everything, that real knowledge is learning how to use everything in the service of Krishna or God. Then you become a civilized person and you begin to develop transcendental knowledge just by understanding that. Okay, so that's point number 11. Now, point number 12 says, one should accept only those things that are set aside by the Lord as his quota. And then Prabhupada gives an example. The cow, for instance, gives milk, but she does not drink that milk. She eats grass and straw, and her milk is designated as food for human beings. Such is the arrangement of the Lord. Thus, we should be satisfied with those things he has kindly set aside for us, and we should always consider to whom those things we possess actually belong. So that's number 12. And then, number 12, and then number 13. Thus, we should be satisfied with those things he has kindly set aside for us, and we should always consider to whom those things we possess actually belong. That's number 13. So there are 33 points in this short purport. Okay, so we just covered 13. And point 14. Take, for example, our dwelling, which is made of earth, wood, stone, iron, cement, and so many other material things. If we think in terms of Ishapanishad, we must know that we cannot produce any of these building materials ourselves. We can simply bring them together and transform them into different shapes by our laborer. So that's point number 14. Point number 15. A laborer cannot claim to be a proprietor of a thing just because he has worked hard to manufacture it. Well, yeah. So, of course, Karl Marx would disagree with that statement. He would say, well, if the laborer made something, then he should own it also. But that doesn't always work because in order to have all these materials, usually, you go to Home Depot or you go to Lowe's and you buy them, right? And where did they get them from? Well, they got them from the forest, or they got it from a steel mill, or and so forth. So ultimately, Krishna is the proprietor of everything. And so human beings will just take some of the products of nature and make things with them, like houses and clay pots and furniture, whatever. But the point is that all endeavors and the energy for producing those endeavors and the intelligence for making those different things, it's all coming from Krishna. And the fact that people out of false ego refuse to accept that means they get caught up in the reactions, karmic reactions, because they ignore the proprietorship of the Lord. And therefore, a statement at the end of this, the point number 33, at the end of this purport, is the root cause of sin is deliberate disobedience of the laws of nature by ignoring or by not taking into account the proprietorship of the Lord. So that's why I say the fundamental issue is who owns all these things. Now, people will say, well, I own this because I paid for it or I worked for it. That may seem true, but over time, we lose all those things also, right? And therefore, the ultimate proprietor or owner is Krishna himself. And if we use everything in Krishna's service, then we become protected by the Lord because we are obedient to his instructions. And at that point, Krishna protects us and gives us the knowledge by which we can come to him. So this is a difference between, and this is also explained in Bhagavad-Gita. Let me just find that. Right in the first chapter, it says, in the 37th, one second. In the 32nd to 35th verse, In the purport, it says, Arjuna has addressed Lord Krishna as Govinda, because Krishna is the object of all pleasures for cows and the senses. By using this significant word, Arjuna indicates that Krishna should understand what will satisfy Arjuna's senses. But Govinda is not meant for satisfying our senses. If we try to satisfy the senses of Govinda, however, then automatically our own senses are satisfied. Materially, everyone wants to satisfy his or her senses, and he or she wants God to be the order supplier for such satisfaction. The Lord will satisfy the senses of the living entities as much as they deserve, but not to the extent that they may covet. Now, why is that? Because one has karma from previous life. It can be good or bad. It can be a mixed bag of good and bad karma. Therefore, they are going to have certain amount of success and certain amount of failure. Nothing can change that because it's the laws of nature. Karma is a law of nature. It punishes people that ignore God's instructions, and it rewards people who follow God's instructions. However, people don't understand this. And when they are suffering, they don't understand why. Well, if someone is suffering, it's because they made mistakes in the past. And it's a message from God that now you should find out what your mistakes are. And if you can't find out, if you can't remember what mistakes you made, then you go and ask an expert like a genuine devotee, and he can help a person understand what those mistakes are. Well, the big ticket ideas of mistakes are meat eating, gambling and intoxication, and illicit sex. Those are the 4 pillars of sinful activity. So whether it's 1, 2, 3, or 4 of those things, it all causes misery in life. And also, by the laws of nature, as we saw in the first mantra, it says that God has set aside for everyone their quota for food, for everything. And if we accept the minimal quota that's set aside for us by God and remain satisfied with that, then we're not affected by the laws of karma. It's when we want more than what we need. And it's when we develop these false ideas that I am the proprietor, I am the enjoyer, I'm number 1, everyone is number 2, and there's no God. When I die, everything is over. Therefore, I should use every second for sense gratification. In other words, work hard and play hard, as they say in English. So that philosophy or that motivation is what gets people caught in the intricacies of karma, and thus they're forced to take birth again and receive the good and bad results of their previous activities. So, therefore, it says here, the Lord will satisfy the senses of the living entities as much as they deserve according to their previous karma, but not to the extent that they may covet or they may desire. But when one takes the opposite way, namely, when one tries to satisfy the senses of Govinda without desiring to satisfy one's own senses, then by the grace of Govinda, all desires of the living entity are satisfied. In other words, if we have only pure spiritual desires to please Krishna, then Krishna will satisfy all those spiritual desires. But if we have material desires to satisfy ourselves, or our family, or our state, or our group, or our company, or whatever, then you only get what you deserve by previous karma. But if a person gives up desiring selfish things for self-indulgence and they desire only to please Krishna, at that point, there's no limit to how Krishna will satisfy those pure desires for service for him. Now, this is secret knowledge, but it's an open secret knowledge. But most people, even if they hear this, they say, I don't accept that. Why? Because they are so much in ignorance, they can't even understand simple things like this that would alleviate all the causes of their suffering in life. So, therefore, that adamancy, that recalcitrance to good advice is the symptom of people who are in illusion. They don't take good advice. And here Krishna is speaking in the Bhagavad-Gita, right in the first chapter, 32nd and 35th verse. And it says, but when one takes the opposite way, namely, when one tries to satisfy the senses of Govinda without desiring to satisfy one's own senses, then by the grace of Govinda, all desires of the living entity are satisfied. So in other words, when we have pure desires, not selfish desires, pure desires to please the Lord by our thoughts, our activities, at that point there's no limit to how much Krishna will satisfy those desires. This is rare transcendental knowledge. And then it says, Arjuna's deep affection for his community and family members is exhibited here partly due to his natural compassion for them. He is therefore not prepared to fight. Everyone wants to show his opulence to friends and relatives, but Arjuna fears that all of his relatives and friends will be killed on the battlefield, and he will be unable to share his opulence after victory. This is a typical calculation of material life. The transcendental life, however, is different. Since a devotee wants to satisfy the desires of the Lord, he can, Lord willing, accept all kinds of opulence for the service of the Lord, and if the Lord is not willing, he should not accept a farthing, or not accept a penny. Arjuna did not want to kill his relatives, and if there were any need to kill them, he desired that Krishna kill them personally. At this point, he did not know that Krishna had already killed them before their coming onto the battlefield, and that he was only and that Arjuna was only to become an instrument for Krishna's desire. This fact is disclosed in following chapters. As a natural devotee of the Lord, Arjuna did not like to retaliate against his miscreant cousins and brothers, but it was the Lord's plan that they should all be killed. The devotee of the Lord does not retaliate against the wrongdoer, but the Lord does not tolerate any mischief done to the devotee by the miscreants. The Lord can excuse a person on his own account, but he excuses no one who has done harm to his devotees. Therefore, the Lord was determined to kill the miscreants, although Arjuna wanted to excuse them. So this is an analysis of the history of the Bhagavad-Gita. But the solution to human suffering and trouble and confusion is surrender to the Lord. Rather than, because if we don't surrender to the Lord, we're going to surrender to Maya. So take your pick. Is it Maya or is it Krishna? Krishna will lead to eternal life. Maya will lead to continual birth and death in the material world. So the trouble is that Maya has established herself so solidly, or so, in such an all-encompassing way that it's very hard to accept the teaching of Krishna. Why is that? Because from childhood, we are trained in modern schools not to believe in God, not to believe in the Vedic scriptures, and to accept speculative, so-called science, rationality, and logic. And therefore, people are confused about what is actually the real goal of life. The real goal of life is not sense gratification. The real goal of life is using our senses, including the mind, in service of Krishna, to please Krishna. And in that way, we become protected by the Lord, and the Lord gives us intelligence by which to continue on the path of progressive spiritual life. Okay, so now point number 16. In modern society, we're coming back to the Ishapanishad and this mantra 1 and the 33 points in this mantra. Now we're on point 16. In modern society, there's always a great quarrel between the laborers and the capitalists. This quarrel has taken on an international shape, and the world is in danger. Men face one another in enmity and snarl just like cats and dogs. So that's point 16. Point 17. Sri Ishapanishad cannot give advice to the cats and dogs, but it can deliver the message of Godhead to man through the bona fide acharyas, or holy teachers. That's point 17. Point 18. The human race should take the Vedic wisdom of Sri Ishapanishad and not quarrel over material possessions. One must be satisfied with whatever privileges are given to him or her by the mercy of the Lord. There can be no peace if the communists or the capitalists or any other party claims proprietorship over the resources of nature, which are entirely the property of the Lord. Now, point number 19. The capitalists cannot curb the communists simply by political maneuvering, nor can the communists defeat the capitalists simply by fighting for stolen bread. If they do not recognize the proprietorship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all the property they claim to be their own is stolen. That means that they get the karmic reaction for stealing something that belongs to God. Point number 20. Consequently, they will be liable to punishment by the laws of nature. Nuclear bombs are in the hands of both communists and capitalists, and if both do not recognize the proprietorship of the Supreme Lord, it is certain that these bombs will ultimately ruin both parties. Well, we're getting closer and closer to that right now. Now, point 21. Thus, in order to save themselves and bring peace to the world, both parties must follow the instructions of Sri Ishapanishad. So what is the main instruction of Sri Ishapanishad in this first mantra? It's that one should live a life of a minimalist, that is, accepting only what our minimum needs are, and everything beyond that using in the service of God. So, therefore, one must have a regulated life. That is the beginning of civilized life, when one has regulated principles, like going to sleep early, waking up early in the Brahma Muhurta, 3 hours before the sunrise. And those 3 hours are the best time in the life of a person for making spiritual advancement. Most people are sleeping through the Brahma Muhurta, and then they wake up, and they drink some coffee, and then they rush to the office or wherever, the factory or the business. So that is a wasted life. But someone who allocates time to make spiritual progress, as well as maintain their responsibilities in life, family responsibilities also, that is a spiritually progressive person. Therefore, one must have a strict schedule every day. And number one thing is going to bed before 10 o'clock at night and waking up at the latest 4 o'clock. And therefore, there's still time to chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, to read or hear Bhagavad-Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and cook food and offer it to Krishna, and Krishna offers it back as his prasadam. So those things could happen, or should happen, early in the morning. Then you're ready to face the world, but with the inspiration of having heard Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaking about himself directly, and therefore one is not sidetracked by false propaganda, false education, false concepts. So, number it was number 21. Thus, in order to save themselves and bring peace to the world, both parties, that means communists and capitalists, must follow the instructions of Sri Ishapanishad. Point 22. Human beings are not meant to quarrel like cats and dogs. They must be intelligent enough to realize the importance and aim of human life. Okay, now it's going to explain what the aim of human life is. Point 22. The Vedic literature is meant for humanity and not for cats and dogs. Cats and dogs can kill other animals for food without incurring sin. But if a man kills an animal for the satisfaction of his uncontrolled taste buds, he is responsible for breaking the laws of nature. Consequently, he must be punished. So that's point 23. In other words, human beings should not eat meat or flesh because they have to unnecessarily kill animals. Now, let's say there's a terrible famine and there's no rice and no wheat and no milk and things like that. Well, in such a dire situation, one can eat meat to maintain life. But we're not there. And we haven't been for a long time. In case there is such a dire situation, then one can eat meat to maintain life. But in general, there's so much opulence here. You go to the Safeway, you go to Fred Meyer, you go to QFC, all these different places. It's full of food and varieties. There are 10 varieties of this and 10 varieties of that. So there's no need to eat meat because it's very sinful to eat the flesh of an animal that has been killed for one's own sense gratification. Of course, no one will listen to that. Even Hindus today, at least 75% of the Hindus eat meat, which means they're not Hindus. What's the difference between a Hindu and a Muslim then? They eat meat, they drink, they smoke, now they philander also. At least the Muslims, they pray 5 times a day, the Azam. How many times a day do Hindus pray? The real ones, well, yeah, the real Hindus, they'll go to Mangal Arati in the morning, they'll go to Sundar Arati in the evening, and if they chant their Gayatri mantra, they're chanting at least 3 times a day. So, you know, they like the Muslims, they are thinking of God all day long. But most Hindus have left that. They're watching Bollywood movies and just engaging in nonsense activities now, drinking, smoking, and eating meat, and so forth, and all those so-called good things, the good life. It's good for going to hell, yes, but it's not really good. So one should not be a phony. Civilized life begins with the Varnashrama system. Varnas are the four divisions of society, and ashrama are the spiritual orders of life. So everyone is meant to function in the Varnashrama system. So the Varnas are, you have Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra. And then the ashrama system is brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyas. So whatever may seem to be inequality in the varna system is annihilated by the ashrama system, because the ashrama system helps everyone progress spiritually. The varna system is for having the continuity and peaceful and progressive society, where people cooperate with each other rather than work against each other. And everyone has their duties. The Sudras, the Vaishyas, the Kshatriyas, and the Brahmanas. Now, Brahmanas are supposed to have a vow of poverty. So if you see a Brahmana driving around a BMW with gold chains around the neck and a Rolex, he's not really a Brahmana. Just because he can say some mantras, that doesn't mean anything. What's important is that he has a vow of poverty and he has no material interests. He simply is a teacher. And Brahmanas, traditionally, they would maintain themselves by teaching the Vedas and learning the Vedas. Learn the Vedas and teach the Vedas. And also by learning how to do the Vedic rituals and teaching how to do the Vedic rituals. And then by receiving charity and giving charity. Just like Tukaram, he had a very interesting life. I don't know if you've seen the movie about him, or you read about Tukaram in Maharashtra. But at one point, most of his life he was poor, but one time he became very wealthy. But what did he do? He gave it all away. And his wife got really upset with him. But, he said, look, if God gives us more than we need, we should distribute it. Why hold on to it? There are other people that are suffering also. So that is the real Brahmana. Brahmanas are not money makers. They make character, or they develop character, good character, or sadachar, as they say in Sanskrit. So when each of the Varnas works cooperatively and follows the rules and regulations which are explained in the Bhagavad-Gita for each of the Varnas, and then the ashramas, there's no such thing as you have to be born a Brahmana to be a Brahmana. That's another one of the false things that has entered into Hinduism. Anyone from any Varna, even if they're lower than Sudra, like Chandalas and Malechas and Yavanas, they also can make spiritual advancement if they're willing to follow instructions of the genuine teachers, the genuine Brahmana teachers. So, therefore, there's always this upward movement in the Varnashram system for everyone. And when people cooperate with each other, then you get things done. And so the Varnashram system is to help people to cooperate with each other and progress materially and spiritually, so that everyone also has the ability to make spiritual advancement. Okay, so when people follow the Vedic rules and regulations, the yamas and niyamas, so the yamas are things you shouldn't do, and the niyamas are things you should do every day. If people follow these rules and regulations, then there's peace, there's prosperity, there's happiness, and there's the protection of God, or Krishna. Okay, so now on point 24, the standard of life for human beings cannot be applied to animals. The tiger does not eat rice and wheat or drink cow's milk because he has been given food in the shape of animal flesh. Among the many animals and birds. Some are vegetarian and others are carnivorous. But none of them transgress the laws of nature, which have been ordained by the will of the Lord. Animals, birds, reptiles, and the other lower life forms strictly adhere to the laws of nature. Therefore, there is no question of sin for them, nor are the Vedic instructions meant for them. Human life alone is a life of responsibility. So the animals are completely controlled by instinct, and instinct is the dictation of Paramatma, or Krishna, in the heart of the animal. Human beings, or the human form of life, has limited free will. Every one of us have limited free will. Now, anyone who is in the material world has misused that limited free will and chosen to walk away from Krishna out of envy of the Lord. That's why we are prisoners in the material world, and the warden of the prison is Durga Mata, who gives us material success and then takes it away slowly or abruptly until we go until we go crazy, right? One lady I know, who's a very nice Indian lady who's a psychologist. One day I asked her, I said, well, do you see a lot of people that have problems? She said, oh yeah, every day. That's what my job's all about. I said, well, what's their problem? She said, everyone is attached to something and they're losing it, and it makes them go crazy. So that's because they're attached to something material. If you become attached to Krishna, you can never lose Krishna. But if you're attached to a house, a car, 401k, stocks, I don't know, so many things, different people, whatever, then you're destined to be a failure in life, because everyone is going to lose all those things, because everyone gets old, gets sick, and dies. So, therefore, everything belongs to Krishna. Everything should be used in the service of Krishna. If you do that, including your food, everything should be offered to Krishna first and then offered back as his prasad. Then Krishna personally protects the devotee. Now, if Krishna is protecting you, you have no problems in life. Jai Shri Shri Radha Nila Madhava Ki Jai. Okay, now point number 25. Animals, birds, reptiles, and other lower life forms strictly adhere to the laws of nature. Therefore, there's no question of sin for them, nor are the Vedic instructions meant for them. Human life alone is a life of responsibility. 26. It is wrong, however, to think that simply by becoming a vegetarian, one can avoid transgressing the laws of nature. Vegetables also have life, and while it is nature's law that one living being is meant to feed on another, for human beings, the point is to recognize the Supreme Lord. Thus, one should not be proud of being a strict vegetarian. Animals do not have developed consciousness by which to recognize the Lord, but a human being is sufficiently intelligent to take lessons from the Vedic literature and thereby know how the laws of nature are working and derive profit out of such knowledge. So that's point 28. And now, point 29. If a man neglects the instructions of the Vedic literature, his life becomes very risky. A human being is therefore required to recognize the authority of the Supreme Lord and become his devotee. He must offer everything for the Lord's service and partake only of the remnants of food offered to the Lord. This will enable him to discharge his duty properly. In the Bhagavad-Gita 9:26, 9th chapter, 26th verse, the Lord directly states that he accepts vegetarian food from the hands of a pure devotee. Therefore, a human being should not only become a strict vegetarian, but should also become a devotee of the Lord, offer the Lord all his food, and then partake of such prasadam, or the mercy of God. So that's point 30. Only those who act in this way can properly discharge the duties of human life. Those who do not offer their food to the Lord eat nothing but sin and subject themselves to various types of distress, which are the results of sin. That's point 31. Point 32, the root of sin is deliberate disobedience to the laws of nature through disregarding the proprietorship of the Lord. Disobeying the laws of nature or the order of the Lord brings ruin to a human being. Point 33 and the last point, conversely, one who is sober, who knows the laws of nature, and who is not influenced by unnecessary attachment or aversion, is sure to be recognized by the Lord and thus become eligible to go back to Godhead, back to the eternal home. So in this 4-page purport, you have 33 major points. And just to show you how compact and intensely informative the Ishapanishad is. And it's only 18 verses, but if you read this book and understand it, you understand the whole entire Vedic philosophy. Hare Krishna. Are there any questions? We're going through this book verse by verse, so we've only covered the invocation verse and the first verse. You have another 17 verses to understand. Are there any questions? No questions? No answers. Okay, Haribol, thank you very much. Every night we have our class and on the Ishopanishad. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Gaura Premanandi, Haribol.